Welcome back, everybody. We have a beautiful podcast for you today. Of course, I'm Dr. Addy. This is Dr. Jace. This is the Functional Code. Thank you, everyone that's been listening so far. Today, we have a really great podcast, don't we, Doc?
Yes, sir.
Today, we have episode 4, The Ultimate Guide to Optimizing Your Sleep. We have a very in-depth view of sleep. Not only sleep, but just how can we improve how we breathe during sleep? How can we improve how we lay during sleep? There are so many different things that impact sleep, and I think a lot of it gets overlooked because we're maybe just focusing on the minutia, and we need to start actually focusing on the actual parts of sleep itself. And so we're going to break that down. Doc and I got some really great topics for that. So today, we're going to get right into it. We have evolved over time. Sleep has been one thing that's been kind of interesting to even think about why humans even evolved to sleep, right? Why would as humans were created to be in a resting state for over 8 hours a day? I mean, it's just kind of funny to think about. But when you really go back to, our ancestors and how we evolved, a lot of this can, make more sense, especially when it comes to, the very common thoughts of ancestors. So obviously we were hunter-gatherers, even just avoiding prey for many hours of the day so that we were less vulnerable states. There were just periods of time where we needed to be basically resting and waiting for our next time. So with that comes just the many things that sleep can improve. And I was doing some research the other day on that, and it is amazing at what sleep can actually help reduce in your life, improve in your life. And here's just a list of some of the things. Sleep can reduce your risk of heart attack. It can reduce your risk for diabetes. It helps to not only repair tissue, but muscle and cells when we are either working out or have damage or need repair. It helps to regulate your appetite and improve your weight management. So of those of you that are either trying to lose weight or manage your weight, it can actually improve that. It helps promote collagen production, so skincare and skin improvement. It helps lower your risk for depression, and it promotes longevity and can even lower your risk for premature death. And so those are just, those are just a handful of things compared to the many other thousands of things that it can help improve. Just that list alone is already a reason to why you need to start hacking your sleep and improving it. So Doc, with those that we just listed, there are obviously some intricacies and science behind all of that. So I know that obviously, even when it comes to sleeping, as we even are learning and we start to sleep, it can help improve the neuroplasticity, ability for us to retain information, all the other things neurologically going on when we go to sleep. What are the maybe 4 or 5 different things that sleep has scientifically, maybe in a nutshell, that viewers can understand just the positive effects from sleep?
Absolutely. To add on to what Dr. Addy was saying, sleep is one of the most important things. We evolved and to take this amount of time instead of mating, instead of hunting for prey, for our brains to almost reset, for us to gather the experiences we've had throughout the day and to integrate that into a memory bank in our cortex. So as we go into sleep, we're going to get into the stages a little bit more specifically, but in terms of neuroplasticity is the ability to learn new things or new skills. And when that happens, any experience that we've had throughout the day, either whether it's a learning bout, studying for school, whether it's learning skills at a job, whether it's just experiences in life that you want to remember, all that has to be transferred during stages of deep sleep and also REM sleep. And I'll go over the stages as the podcast goes on in a little bit here. But in terms of memory, in terms of moving into another day and to build on to the experiences we've had in the past, as much deep sleep is very important. And also, going back to neuroplasticity, it helps with memory recall and circadian rhythm. Now, circadian rhythm, that regulates your 24-hour time cycle, or about thereof 24 hours. There's also time increments to where our body regulates throughout the day and also night, in which is called ultradian cycles, and that goes every 90 minutes. And that's also one reason that you don't want to take naps longer than 90 minutes because it re-regulates the cycle.
Ooh,
but
that's interesting.
yeah, let's get into that in a little bit because I'll dive into that
for sure.
with stages. And then we're going to go over other aspects that influence the circadian rhythm because that influences all the other cells in the body via communication of the nervous system. So when I was talking to Doc earlier, we were talking about what are certain preferences, points of view when sleeping occurs, and he brought up one unique factor of breathing. Whether you're sick or not sick, this will help improve the sleeping quality and the depth of sleep. So Doc, I would love your point of view on the evolution of nasal breathing, how we've evolved of our nose, jaw, and let's do a little deep dive.
Yes. So like Doc said, we're going to dive into this. In the first place that we want to start, first and foremost, is in order to sleep, we need to breathe, and we need to breathe well. And one of the things that over time can really impact your sleep is not being able to breathe well. Those of you that snore or have sleep apnea, whether or not you want to agree with us, I know you don't feel as well rested when you wake up, especially if you don't have if you do not have a CPAP machine or something to help improve sleep, or you haven't done a serious dive into reducing the snoring. And so, I was born with a deviated septum, and I have my whole life suffered so many interesting setbacks from having a deviated septum, and it's crazy to think, but I never understood when I was in high school. I trained very hard in high school. I was super fit. I was heavily involved in basketball, and so we were up and down the courts. I would play for days in a row. But for some reason, and I did work very hard to make sure that I was one of the most conditioned on the team, but for some reason, my dad would always tell me, he's like, why are you always pulling on your jersey, which in sports, when you pull on a jersey, it means you're tired and you're looking to get out of the game or take a break. And he's like, you are pulling on your jersey way more than your teammates. Why are you always asking to come out? And I'm like, I don't know. And for the longest time, I just never understood that because I worked hard and I wasn't, slacking on my conditioning by any means. And it wasn't until I was further along in chiropractic college when I really dove into nasal breathing and just the effects of breathing alone. And I went back and I realized I probably was a poor breather and I just didn't breathe well through my nose. And had I actually taken the initiative and even understood that nasal breathing was something that I could have focused on, I wondered how my endurance would have been affected. And now that many studies have come out and showed that nasal breathing can improve performance over time and just those kinds of things. I already know that that's what it was, but had I known back in the day, I wish I would have, but yes. Obviously I'm glad I know now because since I've been focusing on breathing more effectively with my deviated septum even, my sleep has improved, my anxiety has improved. Anytime I'm in the gym or performing, I can actually regulate and improve my stamina and endurance so that I'm not breathing too heavily and I'm actually controlling my heart rate, just so many different things. But not only that, for what we're talking about today, just how much it affects my sleep. So just how we got to this point, let's kind of go back in the timeline of us as primates in a way. So we never had noses, and it wasn't until we started to cook food and properly mash food because it was cooked and easier to eat, that we didn't have this drastic change of structure of our skeletal system until that point, really. And this was 800,000 years of evolution going through a time. But as we continued to do that, we then saw a drastic change in our ability to not only consume food quickly, but the amount of fat we were eating was changing how big our brains were getting. And so what was happening was we started shifting as far as facial structure is obviously to make room for the brain. We had to come out as far as the anatomy here, which is then we developed what was initially to be a longer, pointier nose with thinner nostrils. Not only that, though, we developed bigger sinuses, which closed off more throat space, so we just didn't breathe through the throat as well either. And finally, we developed larger and wider jaws. And with this, it changed our jaw structure, and we now developed more dental crowding and had much more issues with our jaws. And this developed at a rate where over time, there's many arguments on this. Some say that we are now worse breathers than we were before. Others argue that there really hasn't been a change over time as far as effectiveness of breathing, because when we grew a nose, it actually did improve our health. We can humidify and filter the air. We can filter the temperature of the air. We actually have parts of our nose that protect us from inhaling pathogens, a lot of the other things that a nose can do. But in terms of nasal breathing, we now have the chance of developing a deviated septum, which can reduce nasal breathing, obviously in my case. So many things where if there is any obstruction to that nasal passage, it's going to make a huge difference in nasal breathing. And why that's so important, getting to the importance of the nose, which I kind of already talked on, but we breathe primarily through our nose, and if we don't, it's going to succumb us to a lot of different issues, and I'll talk about that as we get into the podcast. But why we breathe through the nose, again, it reduces our risk of inhaling pathogens through the collection of the nasal hairs. We have the ability to humidify the air, make it warmer for us, easier for the lungs when it gets into the lung tissue. It has the ability to regulate that temperature, obviously, as we're breathing. So many other things. There was even studies back showing that it was through sexual selection that noses were more primarily looked at in breeding as a stronger trait. And so there might even be facial symmetry and sexual selection involved with us growing a nose. Yeah, many different things. But nasal breathing, finally, as I've gotten to it now, here are some of the big benefits of nasal breathing. So number one, it promotes relaxation. So when we breathe through our nose, it is a vagal nerve stimulator. And Doc, as you know, the vagus nerve, heavily studied nerve, one of the main sources of regulating your autonomic nervous system. And so when we are nasal breathing, it is down-regulating that nervous system, and we have the ability to promote relaxation. So that's number one. Number two, it actually helps improve lung function. So when we are breathing through our nose, we have a wider ability to do diaphragmatic breathing. And we know just how important diaphragmatic breathing is, especially when it comes to low back pain, performance lifting. We all know that just how crucial it is to breathe through your diaphragm. And so when we can promote diaphragmatic breathing, we're bracing better. We're promoting, again, better nervous system stimulation. And we just have a better all-around improvement of breathing and lung function. Again, when we breathe through the diaphragm, it can allow for greater rib lifting and better use of those lung lobes as we're diaphragmatic breathing. So number three, as we breathe through the nose, we don't breathe through the mouth, so we're not snoring. We don't have sleep apnea. Snoring and sleep apnea are both contributed to worse sleep cycles. We don't get into as deep of sleep. It actually causes frequent waking. Number four, it supports dental health, which, believe it or not, I mean, this is crazy, but those who are mouth breathers have more dental occlusion and a greater risk of getting cavities. And this is supported by the literature, which is crazy. One of the dentists that I used to go to, she was a TMJ specialist, and one of the first things she worked with me, again, because I have a deviated septum, I've also had issues with malocclusion. I had to have braces. I've had TMJ issues. Like, it's crazy how many of these things are starting to add up. And I didn't know this until I really looked into it. But as a dentist, she was helping with my tooth pain. She was the first one to point out that I'm a poor breather. This is my dentist, by the way.
How old were you roughly?
I was 24, 25 maybe.
Sure.
And she said, number one, as a dentist, she didn't say you needed to, brush more. She didn't say that you needed to drill into this tooth to help it relieve pain. No. She told me that I'm a poor breather. She said it was a good thing that I got braces because that only made it better. And she said that I'm a clencher, and because I'm a poor breather, it's actually contributing to an increased nervous system response, and I'm more anxious and I grind more. And so there were just so many things that once I started to nasal breathe, it reduced the amount of snoring that I had, it allowed me to sleep better, and it improved my tooth pain. Like I don't have as much tooth pain when I'm breathing. When I'm breathing appropriately, I know that I'm doing well because my tooth isn't hurting. So crazy stuff.
It's unique.
Nasal breathing enhances athletic performance. We kind of already touched on that, but as we nasal breathe, it actually promotes what's called nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide production is a vasodilator, can help improve our ability to flow blood through our bodies. Obviously, as we have improved blood flow, we have the ability to create more oxygen to the tissues, all of those good things. Plenty of studies have shown deviated septum can reduce performance, which is why I would recommend deviated septum surgery only for those who are athletes. Again, there's a lot more research that needs to be done, in my opinion, on deviated septum surgery, just because there's a higher increase of surgery repeat if you're getting it early on in life. Really, yes, it can improve performance, and it does improve performance immensely, but in my opinion, there are better ways to manage it. It's a very invasive surgery, and if you need if there's a really high chance of needing it again, then in my opinion, it wasn't a success, right? Yep. So why would you do the surgery if you're only going to need it again? However, if you have a short amount of athletic window where you're competing and you really need to compete well, maybe you are being paid for it, then yes, I think that is something that you should definitely look into. But other than that, I wouldn't do it myself. And then, lastly, it activates the vagus nerve, which is what we already talked on. Again, super appropriate for reducing anxiety, a lot of other types of nervous system issues. Nasal breathing is absolutely something that I think everyone should look into.
And Doug, going back to your point, when you're saying that the facial structure almost remolds itself, or has been since we evolved, and I even heard this from a dentist, gosh, this a few years back, on how even like the rows of your teeth and how wide your mouth could be with the pressure increase. I'm sure this is with the foods we eat, with more processed foods, easier for us to absorb, and just even chewing. It closes the row of mouth and it makes it more narrower.
Yes, our mouth shrunk.
Yes.
And so, again, our mouths shrunk, our sinuses got wider, again, to make room for the brain this way.
Yes. We
grew a nose so we can grow out this way. And again, we needed to do this because we're now living much longer. We're much smarter. I mean, absolutely, it was a positive thing for us to get bigger brains, incredibly. Yes. The argument, though, is, did it come with a cost? And they're still trying to figure that out. Because if it is at a cost, and we are poor breathers, then this is something that we need to know. This is something that we need to work on. Are we now at a disadvantage, and how can we put that towards an advantage for us? Because it's all about education. I had not changed anything about that until I was 25, until someone told me. I wish I would have known that back when I was competing. Would it have made a difference? I don't know, but I can assure you it probably would have. I maybe, again, would have had more stamina, could have played more minutes. All makes a difference. So, for sure.
And I know this is stuff that we talk to our patients about on a day-to-day basis, which is why we're bringing as much knowledge as we can. So if you're listening, start off earlier in life, whether that's nasal breathing strips, and I'll get to that here in a second. There's a study that we were talking about before we got on mic here that people should hear about. What was that study that you were saying?
Yeah, so if any of you want to learn more about kind of the evolution of how we breathe and why nasal breathing is so important, even how to hold your breath for a lot longer. James Nestor is an author that I read, and he wrote the book called Breathe. And in this book, he highlighted a lot of things that I've already kind of spoke on. But the main thing that I took from his book, which was so interesting, is he worked with a very well-renowned ophthalmologist and basically an EENT specialist, someone who knows about your nose, throat, ears, all those things. And in the study, this ophthalmologist basically temporarily plugged James's nose, and he plugged it in a way where this thing was not coming off unless you had to surgically remove it. Like it was surgically put on there and plugged it. And there was no way this thing was coming off. And I know 10 days is a very short sample of time, and it was only done on 2 people. However, I think it is a very large insight into why nasal breathing versus mouth breathing is something to be concerned about. But for 10 days, he was plugged. He could only breathe out of his mouth. This is what he found after 10 days only of mouth breathing. So, number 1, he developed sleep apnea in 10 days.
Wow.
He developed sleep apnea in 10 days. The doctor assessed him. They did a study. They showed it. He had medically diagnosed sleep apnea after 10 days.
Wow.
Just by mouth breathing alone. So it's very scary. Sleep apnea is no joke. It really isn't. For those of you who don't know, sleep apnea is when you actually stop breathing during the night. And you usually awaken with a very loud gasp for air. It's very scary. And with that period of not breathing, again, you're not getting oxygen, which is important. And there has to be this very almost loud relapse of breathing, which can wake you up. Again, which is what we're going to get to.
Yes.
And with why waking up is definitely not important if you're trying to sleep. He noticed decreased energy. Again, he wasn't sleeping well, so that makes sense. He was awaking frequently at night and could not stay asleep. So he'd get back, but he couldn't actually stay asleep. He had increased gum sensitivity.
Fascinating.
He had gum irritation, and he felt as though he had a saliva imbalance. He had dry mouth and could not produce saliva that well.
Makes sense.
This is 10 days. He had worsening anxiety and stress, which is something he had already dealt with, but he said it was severely exacerbated. That is scary to think if you're sleeping years on end as a mouth breather. What other kinds of things are you developing without breathing through your nose? So
Yeah.
I think that was something crazy. And I know that there's been other studies that have been done on it, but that one alone definitely got my attention.
And could you even imagine, just a couple people, imagine if they did a study for 50,
Yes.
100 people.
Yes. And for longer than 10 days.
Yes.
Now, what does a month or several months to a year look like of mouth breathing? Which is why I think, again, it's going to be important to develop more research on this topic. And as we do, I think we're only going to see more of our theory coming to, actual fruition, where we do know that if you are breathing out of your nose, you're going to have much more positive effects and less negative effects. So yeah, that's nasal breathing in a nutshell. Definitely recommend if you feel you're a poor nasal breather, or if you feel like you are snoring a lot. I'm sure your spouse has said something. Definitely want you to look into that. Some things that I've found to be of help is nose strips at night. Those adhesive strips, I'm sure you've seen them. They work very well for me. I've actually just purchased a different one, which uses magnets, so it's not always adhesed on your nose, which can kind of get raw to the skin. So there are definitely things out there. I've even seen now they're making stints that you can actually implant into your nose, which is crazy. They're very expensive, but you can wear them 18 to 24 hours a day. So curious about that. I'm really excited to see the upcoming research. I know that they even have an implantable device underneath your chest to help you reduce sleep apnea. I'm not sure how it works. I know a couple of my family members have done it and said it works really well. I still need to look into it. But yeah, there's a lot out there for sleep apnea, obviously reducing snoring, reducing your mouth breathing. So definitely things you should look into. But Doc, I know we're all very interested in understanding sleep itself. So I know we're excited to get into the stages of sleep, Doc. You've done a great amount of research on this, and we're gonna kind of dive really deep into each of those stages. So let's start with REM versus non-REM, and really what's the difference between all of that?
Absolutely. So when we look at non-REM sleep versus REM sleep, there's a few differences, but I'll go through the stages and more importance on what you should know, and then take away a couple of key points. And again, we're not sleep researchers. We're just looking at the research and trying to bring you as many tools as possible. So when you first go into sleep, and this is where when your eyes close, there's still a lot of brain activity. So when we're getting into sleep, the stages are non-REM sleep, stages 1 through 4.
And Doc, what's REM again, just so people know?
Rapid eye movement.
Rapid eye, okay.
Thank you, yeah. So stages 1, stages 2 of non-rapid eye movement or non-REM sleep. There's still a lot of activity in the brain. When they look at the diagram for sleep studies, they look at the frequency and also amplitude of the waves. The first stage of non-rapid eye movement sleep, when we first close our eyes, there's still a lot of brain activity. There's less amplitude, but still high frequency of waves. If you look at the waves of that, it's almost like a radio frequency, to where FM a little higher, but it doesn't go to the depth versus AM has lower, has more amplitude, and then it goes into more of a longer distance. But from stage 1 to stage 2, it goes from short little flutter movements of the frequency to where then we start getting a little bit of a higher amplitude, and that's where it's a huge importance on sleep spindles. It's when we start to transfer memory and also neuroplasticity in the brain. This is also where when you go into naps, if you last anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, we can get to that second stage of sleep, which helps significantly for memory recall, but you have to quiet the brain, you have to quiet the mind to get into that. As we're getting into some of the deeper stages of non-REM, stage 3, stage 4, the difference between stage 3 and 4 is the ratio of higher amplitude of wavelength, and to where stage 4 is a higher ratio of longer waves versus type 3, it's a mixture of shorter and longer. And then it goes in back up to REM sleep, which almost mimics the exact state of when someone's awake. So then it goes back into small little frequency of waves, and that's where rapid eye movement takes place. Now the unique part is when we're younger, babies, infants, there's a lot longer stages that we find ourselves in REM sleep, upwards of 50% of the time. That's also where, as we're growing, maturing, learning, we're going to need all that information processed back into the brain. And then as we go on and become adults, then it transfers into somewhere around 20 to 25% of the time we're in REM sleep. But as the sleep progression goes throughout the night, it's always a mixture and difference between non-REM and REM, and it goes in stages as we keep going up. And the more stages of non-REM to REM, the better the sleep is, and that's also why we say anywhere from most people 7 to 9 hours of sleep so we can get as many cycles in as we can. Somewhere between 4 and 5 cycles. And there's also higher ratio of REM sleep spent at the end of the night, which is also why you want higher quality of sleep as the night progresses.
So you can get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So again, going back to the stages, 1, 2, 3, 4 REM, 1, 2, 3, 4 REM, and more time spent with the REM as the night goes on. So when we transfer the memory recall with sleep spindles, that then goes to the hypothalamus and the neocortex for memory recall and also for experiences and remembering certain things that you want to remember throughout the day. So when you go into a hard bout of learning, that's where after that bout of learning, quiet the mind through breathing, also going back to the nasal breathing. So trying to go into longer exhale breathing instead of inhalation, which then gets the whole mind and body back more on a parasympathetic path. And then even taking anywhere from a 15-20 minute nap or close your eyes and going into meditation. So
before we touch on that, Doc,
please do.
I just wanted to bring up, you had mentioned memory recall. Now, when I was in school, I want to say that I remember reading something where if you are studying at night before you sleep, it's actually an advantage for you to improve memory recall because it's so close to sleep. Is that anything that you've heard of before? Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar. It's like, why do you stay up late at night trying to study if you can't retain that information the next day or later on?
Sure.
It only makes sense to do the work prior to and then put sleep at a little bit more of the importance going into bed and waking up in the morning. And then if you go waking up and going back to the material or information you want to learn or skill development, that also helps for the actionable steps and the reprocessing.
So it's prioritize sleep. Don't really prioritize trying to stay up so late without, and basically reducing sleep, having to do that.
Yes.
Sleep is definitely the more important part. That makes sense.
I wish I knew this.
I wish I knew it too.
too.
Sometimes you don't have a choice though. You're just pounding away thinking you got to do what you got to do. But that was interesting when I had heard about that.
Absolutely.
Good point though. Good point on prioritizing sleep. Definitely.
Now the other unique aspect with this is the circadian cycle and circadian rhythm, which that regulates to an area right above where the roof of the mouth is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And there's a pair of those. And those regulate all the other cells in the body. They're also a timer for melatonin release going into the day and cortisol levels, which we'll get into a few of the main specifics, what regulates the circadian cycle. So there's a few things that will alter the circadian cycle, and that's going to be the temperature of not our body, but the environment. It's going to be light coming into the eyes. It's going to be activity of the heart rate or exercise, and then food and water consumption. So we're going to dive into each one of these specific tools for each one. So light going into the eyes. Now this is where I'll take some of the information from Dr. Andrew Huberman, but the main regulators of some genes in the eyes will help set the cascade of melatonin and cortisol release. So when you get up in the morning, preferably get some water, do what you have to do, go into the bathroom, and then just get outside, whether it's walking the dogs, whether it's just taking time to ground yourself in any grass, to connect to the earth is incredibly important. Also with light for going into sleep. There's certain genes that help regulate on the top portion of the eyes, which that's also why we want to have low dim lights lower in the environment versus lights coming from top down, which helps regulate on some genes on the bottom of the eye. And that helps, again, the connection to the brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So monitoring when going to sleep, low dim lights, the intensity of light also matters. Doc even go into blue light blockers in a sec with that one, but very important when you get up going into the day that you're outside anywhere from 20 minutes to a half hour at least. You want as much light going into your eyes that safely can. If you have glasses, that's fine. It just takes about 50 times longer for you to notice the effects in your eyes. And that's the same thing whether it's glasses or screen. Those rays get blocked via the lens. So I probably prefer for most people to use blue light blockers later on in the day to prevent the intensity of light to come in so you're able to get into deeper sleep. But,
and that's so crucial. And a lot of reasons why, like Doc was saying, but primarily it's because not only does it help inhibit those harmful rays, but it actually can inhibit the production of melatonin. And as we obviously are trying to get closer to bed, if we continue to have those types of lights in our eyes and we're actually inhibiting melatonin, it's going to create a worsening effect of us trying to get to sleep. As we know, melatonin is one that we hear all the time, talking about, wish I'd take that for sleep, what should I do with melatonin, all those kinds of things. But melatonin is basically just a neurotransmitter that's secreted towards the end of the day after light has been shut off. And I mean that it's only secreted after all light's been shut off. So that's where it can be such an issue with having too much light before bed. I'm sure you've heard it many times, you know, turn your cell phone off at least an hour or two before bed. It really is. It's because what happens is as melatonin is secreted, it helps to actually prepare you for sleep. And when you don't have that ability, then you're already going to be behind the schedule of trying to get to sleep. So when Dr. Jace is talking about blue light blockers, it's because blue light specifically is a great inhibitor of melatonin.
Yes.
So that's why it's definitely important.
And then even looking at the cell phone, because a lot of us, unfortunately, we wouldn't recommend bringing your phones into bed. It just happens for a majority of the population. I found something kind of fascinating with this. If you turn your phone from straight on to a little bit of the side, those beams of light go outwards versus actually you're still going to get the effects because the light illuminates outwards, but you won't have the intensity coming straight at your eyes. So even holding your phone at an angle will help to a certain extent. I still wouldn't recommend bringing your phone into bed, but yeah,
that's good though. I like that. That's a good point.
Moving into temperature. With temperature, this is where when we're trying to dive into the first 1 to 2 stages of sleep, we want to warm our body going into a cool room, which helps us dive into the stages much quicker with less barriers. So awesome recommendation for that would be either to cool the environment, depending on where you live, of course, anywhere from 65 degrees to 70 degrees or so. If you're cooler and have more covers, you're able to dive into that sleep much easier. Also, if you have to shower going in, I would highly recommend to have warmer showers and then go into a cooler room, which again helps us there. There's a unique aspect where core body temperature, the only way it can be regulated is mainly 3 areas of the body: the palms of the hands, the bottom of the feet, or forehead. So when we're moving around in sleep, or if you toss and turn, one aspect that is absolutely involved, it might not be the only one for you, is the temperature regulation. So if you're moving around, whether it's turning from side to side, where you want to kick your feet out, that is your subconscious trying to move your limbs to cool the body down or to warm it up. Maybe that's you, maybe that's not, either or. That's something that we want to pay attention to. Now, as we go from deep sleep to the waking state, we want a little bit of a warmer environment, which helps bring the brain back to center and it helps us dive into the day. It almost recharges the body as you go into waking states as we're ending with REM sleep. That's also, I'm theorizing this, as we're in higher frequency of waves during REM sleep or rapid eye movements. And that same state mimics very similarly the waking state. I think as the body recharges and goes and wants to wake up, that temperature helps bring it from REM to awake state a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been proven at all, but that's one very, very unique aspect.
You know, as you were talking about all that, I just kind of realized too, like, it's kind of cool how when you really look at the evolution of the human body, how all of it makes sense. And especially if, obviously, when we were cavemen back in the day, we didn't have housing, we didn't have central air, we didn't have anything like that. We had the sun either up or down, and we had basically the alarm clock was the sun. I mean, that's what it was. So it's interesting how it gets cooler at night and you sleep better in colder temperature. As the sun is up, it's warmer, which is what you just mentioned. That's better in the morning for it to be warm. It's important to get sun on the eyes in the morning. Well, if they're already outside, the sun is up, that's already something that's going to be happening, and it's helpful for the body. It's just crazy how our bodies, when you start to look at these things, it's as though it's just what is natural to you is what's best for you. And it's just, as you were talking about that, it makes so much sense. And I know specifically, I sleep better in a colder temperature, and that's just innate to me. And I've always known that. I lived in Minnesota for 30 years of my life, and I slept better in the winter because it was colder. And I just knew that. I knew that winter was coming. I was excited because I slept better when it was cold out and really cold. And there were times when, I mean, this is crazy, but I slept in a 62-degree room in Minnesota in the winter. I mean, there were times where I could see my breath. And again, this is just one N of one case here. But for me, I have such a high thermic output. I am such a hot body. I think I did need a colder than normal room because I do have such a high output of heat. And for those of you who say that they are trying to sleep in a colder room but it's not working, maybe it's not cold enough. You know, maybe you need to play around with that. Maybe you have too many layers and you are, you know, you're warming yourself to try not to reduce, obviously, the core body temperature. But again, it is something that I think does make a difference. And so if you feel as though you need to be a hot box and sleep in the heat, I would argue against that and to try it differently. And if it still works for you, great. Maybe you just have already a low thermic output and you don't need to lower it that much. You know, who knows? But it definitely is person dependent, and I think you should play around with that because it has made a difference for me. Moving to Arizona, sleep was not as easy. I had to get used to a hotter night and not having the temperature down so much. Obviously, I didn't want to go through my AC in the summer, you know, pay through the roof on my air conditioning, so I tried my hardest, but it made a difference not being able to have that colder temperature outside. So for sure, it makes a difference.
And I can relate to moving to Arizona. Same thing. It was much more difficult to get into deeper sleep. I felt like I could always waken much easier. And even back to what you're saying on like the ancestors, I was listening to a couple researchers and we found this from scripts that were read from, gosh, some people that architects.
Yeah.
And they were looking at, when we were looking at the ancestors in a warmer environment, they slept less at night but took naps in the middle of the day. Maybe that was to cool their body down for temperature regulation.
Right. Avoiding the heat maybe, or yeah. Okay.
And then in terms of the cooler days, they slept a little longer at night but no naps during the day. So whether that's related, but
maybe they didn't need to nap if they slept better at night.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Absolutely. So
all makes sense.
There was one small thing I wanted to bring in terms of sleep, that one, it will help reverse the neural flow, and also this is some of Dr. Joe Dispenza, some of his work via breathing techniques. So I'm going to share one of those with you today. So as we're in a shower going before bed, we want, like I said, warmer temperature. If you imagine that on the back of the head. Now we want a signaler. So we're going to need a little bit of a movement of the tailbone. So that's where when you either squeeze your butt muscles, or imagine if my hand was the tailbone. As we're breathing in through the nose, imagining a point on the top of your head, or think and feel the warm water in the back. So when you breathe in through the nose, we're going to tuck the tailbone under, or squeeze the glutes, and we're going to image the top of the head. And we want more longer exhales than inhales, which helps also calm the system down. And you're going to notice this weird sensation of energy for most people. It's something very unique. You might feel a little lightheaded with this, perfectly normal. Doing anywhere from 5 to 10 cycles of this will help significantly also dive into deeper sleep. So going through, and I'll just explain one more time. We want to breathe in through the nose, imagining the warm water, or feeling the warm water on the back of our head / ears, and or without warm water, you can just imagine like a pinprick on the top of your head. And we're going to breathe in. And you can even use this with other practices of, once you get the practice down, then you can start imaging. Instead of the top of your head, you can start thinking of certain organs, so it can bring more resources, blood flow, neural flow to that area for healing. There's some interesting studies that Dr. Dispenza put out that can help. And I'm not making this claim, but some of his literature and books have made claims of people curing cancer, curing other diseases that can't necessarily be explained. But I would suggest you dive into some of his work. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Dispenza's, man, I'll tell you what, that guy, I don't know if any of you know him, but he was in a wicked car accident and he almost died. I think he did die, and then he came back to life.
Yes.
I don't know. It was something crazy.
Yep.
And that man healed himself. His story is amazing. So yeah, it's a book. He's got a bunch of them, but I think the one specifically about that, for sure, you need to read, because my goodness, should you read that, and it will give you just the hope of coming from an incredible tragedy and something that where you feel like you may even have no hope left at all, and just what the body can do to come from an injury like that. My goodness, like that is what we get to experience every day, helping people as they try to heal by themselves, and we get to be, a part of that. It's amazing. So definitely recommend it. So good point.
Absolutely.
Good point, Doc.
So going into the next point, exercise. Now, some people do better exercising in the morning, some at night. I would suggest and encourage more in the morning. So as we're getting light in the eyes, getting up, getting outside, drinking some water, increasing the heart rate, which will help not only for the catecholamines between adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, that helps the whole system waken and help run more smoothly throughout the day. So whether that's biking, whether that's exercising, jogging, walking, strength training, either or, highly suggested earlier in the day and/or at lunch. However, when you're going into bed, or even 3 to 4 hours before bed, you also want a time to where your body can die down and prep for sleep. So it would not be suggested to do any high bouts of exercise to increase your heart rate, because then your body has to re-regulate itself, come back to homeostasis to dive into the first few stages of sleep. If you do find yourself exercising, or if you're on a sports team and you have practice late at night, or a men's league group, to where the more exhale breathing you can do right after that bout of exercise, dimming the lights, that will help prep you for sleep.
Yep.
Just a few small tools that can help
Just
quite
like
a bit.
we had mentioned, the nasal breathing helps bring down that regulate. What they can do in the shower, like you mentioned, too, before bed.
Yep.
Great ways to bring themselves down from that.
Yeah, and there's one other tool that you can bring into this equation is your eyes. The closer that you can look at an object closer to, and you're zoning in intensely, that increases the adrenaline epinephrine, to where if you look at the widest area of the room, just looking straight but focusing on the edges of where you can see, that calms the mind down and releases more serotonin as well. So
Kind of like zoning out.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Good point.
So
Obviously not watching specific video or something, again,
Yes.
different things you can always track back to, obviously, the phone and other things too. But that's interesting.
Yes.
Makes a lot of sense. I know too with exercise, when I had the Whoop band, which Doc I think is still wearing his, yes sir.
Ooh.
There was, three main things that definitely helped me improve my sleep. This is good data. I mean, it was very good data, and this was done 6 to 12 months, I think I was wearing it. But exercise was one of the main ones that if I was exercising, I slept way better, data-wise, way better. And when I mean sleep better, I mean my scores that showed I was in deep or REM sleep was higher. I hit the stages of sleep better. I had less awakenings, which is, I know, a metric that you can see. Like we talked about, frequent awakenings is what we don't want. It's going to remove our ability to get into deep sleep. So actual good data metrics to show it improved my sleep immensely when I was exercising regularly. So for sure, absolutely.
Beautiful. And then let's round out with the last one that will influence the circadian cycle and system, which is food or water intake. As nutrients come into the body, that's also where the system starts, the digestion process. So when you're going into sleep, you want to ideally, if anything, limit the amount of food. So like the midnight snacks, like growing up, my parents always used to say, you want a midnight snack going before bed? I'm like, oh, obviously, yeah. Which, looking back at it, it's probably not the best aspect. I mean, if you're gonna do anything, a meal later at night for dinner, you want more carbs, which will also help you dive into more sleep. In terms of water going into your body, going into sleep, if you wake up at night and go to the bathroom quite frequently, you want to limit the amount of water before bed anywhere from 4 hours or so. I mean, if you have to drink water, by all means, it's very important, but to help with the sleeping cycles, so you're not getting in and out of bed often, limiting that before bed, and then increasing it when you wake up.
Yeah, I know too. The carb thing you were mentioning too, it's also carbs make you drowsy. High amounts of carbs can make you drowsy.
Okay.
Obviously with blood sugar spike too, anyone who's came off of a high sugar morning, right, where you woke up, you had some sugar, and then you're like crashing by 10, it's kind of the same thing where it can at least give that quicker spike and help you maybe come down feeling a little more drowsy too. That's definitely a reason. I do save a lot of my carbs till my supper. So that's interesting you brought that up too. But yeah, most of the carbs I try to consume are at night for a lot of many reasons. One of them being because it does help you kind of wind down after night too. Another thing too is when you obviously start to eat, it can raise your cortisol levels. And this is another thing I want to tie into with melatonin. As you are eating and your cortisol is raised, your ability to secrete growth hormone is going to reduce, because there's an inverse relationship between growth hormone and cortisol. When your cortisol is lower, you can start to secrete more growth hormone. Growth hormone is what we want to secrete at night. It's important for us to sleep because, like I mentioned before, we repair and we're helping to repair. But one reason we are doing that is because we secrete growth hormone. And when we don't have the ability to do so, then it's also going to affect sleep. So if we're eating a lot at night, cortisol is raised, it's going to inhibit our ability to secrete a lot of growth hormone again, which is going to affect sleep. It's also going to affect melatonin production too, which is something that I know we've just talked on as well. So yeah, food before bed. When I was bulking and trying to gain some weight, I noticed my sleep drastically changed. I was trying to fit more meals in, and one of them was a late night meal. My sleep definitely changed. For sure it did. And it was because I not only had high carbs but high protein in those meals, and I think that made a difference too. Again, protein has a thermic effect. It tries to create a stimulus in your body, and so you're churning and burning. Your body's going to be up and awake trying to expel that protein that you just had eaten. So again, super important stuff. And I know, again, if you work late, you're coming home and you got to go to bed. We get it. Like, we have to understand it. But try again to do those exercises that Doc was talking about, to at least once you've eaten, again, try to bring yourself voluntarily down, regulate those systems that you just opened up to, and seeing if that can help, especially if you're going to eat at night or if you have to, work out at night, all the other things that we know that can raise a lot of those body's hormones, neurotransmitters.
Yes, and going back to the point that Doc said with growth hormone, I forgot to bring this up during the stages, but that is excreted much more in non-REM sleep stages 3, 4, and REM sleep.
Yeah.
Which is why as we go through the cycles, we want as many hours as possible. And also for tissue healing, the muscle regrowth, memory recall learning.
So, even some of the studies I've read, athletes who had looked to put more muscle on did so with a better sleep routine than those who weren't sleeping very well. I mean, you want to talk about something that will give you an edge in so many different ways. As an athlete, sleep is your bread and butter, man. You got to be sleeping well to be a high-performing athlete. And I've said this so many times to patients and people I know. If the drug company could somehow turn sleep into a drug, it would be the #1 sold drug on the market. Like, with the amount of benefits that you are given when you sleep, seriously, like, it would be the #1 drug on the market. So, I mean, when we're talking about this, we're talking as though this is probably, if not one of the most important things that you need to be focusing on in your life. And I know we've talked about a lot of things in the past, explaining just how important they are, but no, this is by far got to be one of the most, if not the most important thing you need to be working on. So this is why we're talking about that today, obviously. So this is something that I know you had put in here, and I'm super interested because I've heard a mixed result on what if you should or should not. I know you've talked a little bit about in the beginning of the podcast, but is it advisable to take naps during the day, and why? And I'm going to chime in a little bit at the end of what I've heard, but I'm super curious. I know you've done a lot of, especially with the different cycles you were talking about in sleep. So take it away. I'm super interested in learning more.
So with naps, 2 aspects with this one. If you feel like you need to take a nap, you want to focus on the night sleep the best you can. If there's barriers in the way, like you're a shift worker, then naps might be one of your only options. However, with the body working in ultradian cycles every 90 minutes. You want to limit the nap ideally no longer than 90 minutes, and ideally more than likely for most people anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
It helps you quiet the mind, get into stages 1, 2, more than likely you won't get into 3. But when we get into non-REM sleep, stages 2, that's where the sleep spindles start to take place with memory recall, with neuroplasticity. So there's a few practices, one of which Yoga Nidra, which is a meditation. You can YouTube this. It's a guided meditation, but it allows you to not get into sleep. If you do, that's fine. So Yoga Nidra, anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, beautiful. If you have to take naps to help with your sleep, and if you don't have to take naps, I would suggest not to. There is in your system almost like a pressure cooker to where if your body starts to get sleepy throughout the day, you want to look to food intake. Are you eating a lot of carbs at lunch? And if so, it's your body's energy being filtered to break down that material and those resources instead of the energy throughout your body. So maybe switching up the diet and less carbs at lunch.
Yeah.
But
another reason why I left carbs to the end, because I noticed higher carb lunches made me not a good performer in the afternoon. Yeah. I wasn't as clear with patience. I kind of felt not drowsy, but it definitely made me feel as though I had a resistance. And so again, I left my carbs towards the end because when I was consuming high carb lunches, I wasn't I wasn't adept to being what I would call 100% full clarity, full go, like even energy-wise, right? Probably a little bit of a blood sugar spike after that too. So no, I totally get what you're talking about there.
Yes. So with that, if you struggle to go into sleep at night, try to see if you can stay awake, limit naps, try to stay awake for a couple days, and you'll start noticing there's a breaking point to where you're going to start to get tired. That's when you want to go into bed. So it's almost counterintuitive to what you'd think. Like if you're tired, if you're not sleeping as well, a lot of people think that, oh, maybe I'll go to bed earlier. However, if that is the case, you want to build that pressure intensity of the brain trying to get sleep and paying attention to whether that's yawning, whether that's your eyes are heavier. That's when you want to go into sleep at night. So to build that up over a couple days, obviously if there's certain importance throughout your day that you need your energy, you need your attention, which for most people is most days. But if you have the chance for weekends, I'd look to build up that pressure cooker. And even to regulate the circadian cycle, it takes 3 days to re-regulate itself a minimum. So if you want to start waking up earlier, or if you want to go to bed earlier at night, start on a consistent basis. That's weekends included, waking up the same time.
Yeah.
So the pressure cooker, not necessarily to fight the sleep, but to stay awake until you start noticing signs of sleepiness, where the eyes are getting heavy, whether that's you're starting to fatigue, then try to go to sleep from there.
Got it. So going to sleep early necessarily wasn't, when you had mentioned that, wasn't a way to help improve sleep. It was just get to that point of tiredness and then go to bed.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good point. Okay, I think I understood you there. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, obviously that makes sense because when I go to bed early, I'm just laying in bed anyway until I get tired. So, at least then you can try to do some things that are productive until you get to that point and then go to bed versus just laying in bed rolling around. So I know what you mean when you're coming from that. I liked the smart thermometer idea. Again, with the temperature where you can raise it up. I know for me, if it's cold out and I'm cozy in bed, man, I don't want to get out of that bed. So if it's hotter, heck, I'll get right out of that bed. It makes a difference. Temperature makes such a difference. So that's a cool one. That's a really cool one. I like that.
Yeah, so there's one part we should have brought up earlier in this talk, and that is the genetic aspect of chronotypes, to where certain people are more apt for waking up and doing more work in the morning versus some people are night owls and like doing more work at night. And it's split from what we know into like thirds. Some people, there's a variation between morning and night that they prefer. A third is morning they prefer, night a third. And it changes throughout the cycles of life. So when adolescents, teens start to sleep more, and I think that's also due to puberty, that's due to chemicals in their body changing, they're going to need more sleep. So
They gotta grow. They gotta grow
absolutely.
too. Yep.
However, and then adults, especially on into anywhere from ages 20 to 50 or so, we have a tendency to not want, or if we will, need sleep. And then once we get into older ages of life, let's say 50 plus from a broad scope, they want more sleep as well. So that all changes throughout each person's life cycle, but that's something to where if you have preference for one to do work there, to schedule the sleep, to either wake up earlier, do work, or to stay up later but trying to get sleep, so to schedule out your morning to make sure you get enough sleep.
Have you ever played around? Were you ever at one point early versus later, or have you always been a certain way? Have you ever had to deal with changing that around?
I think teens, I slept into like noon, 1 o'clock. It was
same here.
It wasn't anything normal. Everyone was doing it, but yeah, for me, that's definitely what it is.
When you got to be obviously taking on more responsibilities in life and had more things going on, did you feel you were more of a night owl and it was tougher change to the morning, or was it easier for you to just kind of change to the morning?
For me, I'm definitely a night owl.
Yeah.
If I'm still doing work, I can still keep going
Yeah.
through later areas of night. However, when waking up in the morning, it's hard for me, or more difficult versus nighttime, to get into bouts of either exercise, activity, brain work.
Yep.
So I'm definitely more of a night owl.
Yeah.
But what about you?
Same here. It's weird
Okay.
how 8 p.m. hits and it's like, it's like a new person turns on. And when I say I need stimulation at 8, I need stimulation at 8 because if I don't, then I won't sleep. And so I tried, and I think what it was is it was 4 years of conditioning as I was in med school. Like 8 p.m. was, I had just finished supper, and those who I lived with were going to bed, and then it was my time to finish what I needed to finish because yes, you went to school for those 8 hours, but you didn't retain anything because you were just listening to the lectures. It's now time to study. So food is in the belly. I didn't want to keep anyone else awake, so I would leave and go either somewhere else, or I would just go downstairs and try not to obviously keep a bright screen, anywhere, or turn the TV on or anything like that. So yeah, 8 p.m. would hit, and I did that every single day for almost 4 years. And when I mean every single day, I mean I did. Like, I studied Christmases, I studied any holiday, like any on breaks. Like, I didn't stop. I studied 4 years in a row, every day straight. And most of the work that I put in came from 8 to sometimes 12. And of course, sleep, I'm trying to figure out a way to, to calm that down. And it's gotten better. I used to go to bed at anywhere from midnight to 2. Now I can routinely go to bed at about 10. I can get that 8 p.m. rush settled down till about 10. And so I've done a pretty good job at doing that. But for a while there, it was midnight was about as early as I could get to because of just how I conditioned myself. But no, I know what you mean. I was even working out at 11 o'clock midnight just to get off some of that stimulation because I was just so ready to go. So today I got up at about 6 a.m. and that has been pretty routine for me depending on the day. And I went and worked out, and that hasn't been as much of an issue. I'm so adept to working out at night and just so conditioned for that. It's easier for me to do that. But what I'm noticing though is I don't have as much energy at night because, busy during the day, you obviously know what it's like going through, a full day. And I used to have that energy, and now that I've started to regulate that, I'm starting to think of switching and getting up earlier, working out, and I do want to figure out my morning routine so that I can actually have that. But I'm 30 years old and I'm still working on that. It is what it is.
Yes.
But I'm excited to get that morning routine figured out because I've been dealing with it forever. I just have always been a night owl, but I'm excited to get that figured out.
So do you still have that bout of energy at night somewhere around 8 o'clock?
I still do, yeah. And
Okay.
whether that's, working on a project and putting intense energy into that to kind of wind down, or whether that's doing activities that will counter-react that energy, which is darkening the room and, watching a movie that isn't, or a TV show that isn't adrenaline pumping, something that's just kind of mind-numbing, a way for me to just calm down, getting cozier, just, getting under the covers, or, me and my girlfriend are just gonna, chill on the couch, warm up, get under the covers, warm up, just to, again, try to counteract that at 8 p.m. rush. But if I play into that rush, I'm not going to bed till 2. It's like a ramp. It's like I'm either going to go or I'm not. But if I don't do something about it, it's just going to continue to ramp up, and I'll have anxiety and my mind will race. I'm sure for some of you, you know what that's like when you're trying to fall asleep at night and you've got 10, 15, 20 other things on your mind and you can't get them out of your head. And so I kind of have to address that right at the point. Otherwise, I know it's going to be a tough time for me sleeping at night.
I think even speaking to that point, most everyone has a cortisol release in the later end of the day, night, and then it helps for the melatonin to take over from there. So I think that's one of which I think is absolutely conditioning. Second off, I think the cortisol level definitely helps for the circadian cycle a little bit, but
Yeah.
something.
And it takes time to reduce or to rearrange your circadian rhythm. It does. But consistency and pushing through the consistency when you know it's going to be difficult is probably the toughest thing. That's with anything. We've talked on how many times now with this podcast on consistency and habits, man. It's going to be difficult. So as long as you know that, as long as you know it's going to be a struggle for a while, but it does get better. And it does. I've done it before. I definitely want to do it again, and I'm trying. But if you can get through the beginning stages of forming a habit, which go back to episode 1, man. We're going to go through this, forever and ever. But it's easy to do as long as you have an intention, and if you're going to struggle through it, just having grace and understanding that there's going to be a struggle, and just keep pushing through it, being consistent. And if you happen to mess up one day, well, throw in the towel, man. Just keep going. So getting into, just again, we had talked about a lot of the different stimuluses that can be affected during sleep. One last thing we wanted to hit on was sound, and there have definitely been some things that I know have helped me get to sleep at night. Apps and beats and noises, and it definitely makes a difference. Doc, do you want to just hit a little bit about how sound can impact sleep, and I'll kind of throw in my 2 cents at the end.
Perfect. So when and a lot of this is changing state from high energy to low energy, or if it's hard for you to quiet your mind, if your mind's racing, just to focus on the sound or the frequency, along with focused meditation. As long as you're doing more exhale breathing in a quiet, cool room, I think that'll help significantly. But there's one that I found other than the meditation and longer exhale breathing. They did a study on it. It's kind of fascinating. Maconi Union, the song called Weightless. And it's a few hours long. And they did the study somewhere around 50 people. And they looked at areas of meditation versus listening to the Weightless song, Maconi Union. And they found a difference in more improved sleep, upwards of 65% improvement of diving into the deeper REM stages, the sleep, feeling well rested. It's a different type of tone that can help match certain rhythms of your brain from alpha to later stages theta, which will also help dive and almost work in unison for the body to go into those frequencies.
For sure. And frequencies regulate a lot of the wave productions that the brain makes. And one of the main ones is the delta wave. And there is a lot of studies showing certain frequencies of sound can impact better delta wave production, which is why when you have a certain sound on, that's usually more honing, or in a way, you'll hear it, it's almost Zen-like, right? Yes. It's because it's this frequency that can match this resignation of your body's ability to create a less amplitude wave, and you have ability to relax and calm down with this type. And it's crazy. I don't know if you've ever seen the video, Doc, but they've done videos where they have this sound bowl, and it's a baby that is crying, and they hit this sound bowl, and it's this release of this very loud and Zen-like noise, and the baby literally becomes flaccid, just goes into what looks to be a just like zonked out state. And it's because I think that loud sound overtakes their primitive reflexes and just other things that they are maybe more responsive to. And they go into a Zen-like state, they become quiet, and it like zonks them out.
Wow.
And I think it's so crazy to be able to have that impact. So I've never done it on an infant, but I would look into that if you are a parent and you have trouble either trying to calm down your baby if they're crying or just in a agitated state. The sound bowl thing was wicked. It was very, very cool.
That's so cool.
2 interesting things with my experience with frequencies. So I do love frequencies, not only for sleep, but for other things. There are frequencies that can improve other waves in the brain to help you retain information, learn, and study, or clarity. So alpha wave producing, and that's where there's certain like noises, beats, buzzes that you can listen to. I actually turn them on at a lower noise, and then I play music over them. And so it's kind of like a dull background, and it helped me actually maintain alertness and clarity through studying. I could actually stay studying and on topic, not looking at my phone while those beats were on. So super interesting. Not only that, if I was trying to sleep, I had turned on the specific beats that were helpful for improving and inducing you into a calmer state. And it definitely does make a difference. But when I was really, really amped up at night, like I was mentioning in the past, I would need to see some literature on this, but this is just, again, N of one. I listened to heavy metal to fall asleep.
Fascinating.
When I'm talking heavy metal, I mean, it's the stuff that you work out to. And the only thing that I can think of is, and this was actually even when I was younger too, I would do it when I was in 7th through 9th grade. Like I did, it was weird. I would fall asleep listening to that. And I can only match it up to, it's matching the frequency that I had going on at that time, which was buzzed, stimulated, needing to do things. And it almost like masked it with something that was even more of a higher frequency, and it kind of killed that for me.
Okay.
And I was able to then calm down, and I fell asleep, and I would fall asleep all the time. And I remember one time my mom came into the room, I had fallen asleep listening to this music, and she took the earphone out of my ear, and she told me this in the morning, but she was freaked out because when we pulled it off, she could hear just the loud blaring music, and I was fast asleep, and she was like, just so confused. She's like, what are you doing? Like, how is this normal, you know? But no, I think what it is it does match the stimulatory frequency that I'm at, and helps kind of, it almost masks it or minimizes it because there's a higher frequency above what I'm already feeling. I don't know. I really don't. I'm still trying to look into it. I don't usually need it now. I don't want to depend on something to kind of help me get to sleep. And speaking of dependence, we're going to get into obviously other things too, of what to rely on or what to need when you try to get to sleep. But yeah, frequency, sound, it definitely has an impact. And I think playing around with some of the apps that you can get on your phone. I use an app called, I think it's called Binaural Beats. That's one. There's so many on YouTube that you can look into. And there's a reason why, you know, listening to rain at night, it helps a lot of people fall asleep. It's because the rain puts off a certain frequency that helps calm you down. Rain, other types of things that we know, like why people want to listen to a fan at night or have a fan going at night. It is that fan can create a frequency that just has the ability that, you know, can calm you down, white noise. So yeah, that's my experience on it. It's kind of interesting.
And even for me, like the fan, the white noise, myself, my wife, if we switch up white noise from just that or just a fan, it's harder for us to get into sleep.
Do you usually use a fan to sleep?
Yeah, usually
I do
a fan.
too. Yeah, and it makes a difference. I know immediately if I forgot to turn the fan on when I lay down, because my body is almost expecting it, or it's just out of place. And I'm like, gosh, why am I not falling? Or why am I not like getting to sleep? This is weird. I'm like, oh, the fan's not on.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Again, I don't know if it's anecdotal or if it has something to do with sound frequency, but it does. It makes a huge difference.
I think just us getting used to that too.
A fan too helps
frequency.
regulate the temperature in the room, I'm sure, and that makes a difference.
Yep.
Making it a little cooler too. But yeah. So moving on to the dependency, like we had talked about, I know that there is going to be one thing that everyone's going to want to know about, which is melatonin. Now, we are both doctors. We've studied the body itself. As chiropractors, we are very involved in supplemental forms of medicine. So we've done our due diligence in understanding this, but I know that there's so much more out there. And I know that there are many neurologists who either will or will not use melatonin. I've learned it from so many different thoughts of mine, and here is kind of what I've gathered. And then obviously, Doc, you can give me your intake on it too. But melatonin is secreted in your body. Okay, so it is made to exogenously exist. So you're gonna create it to have it ready to use. If it's exogenous, your body will have to create it in order for you to have it. But if your body doesn't need to create it, it won't. It won't need. It doesn't. It's not going to do extra amount of work if it doesn't need to. If it's already exogenously existing. One way we know is testosterone. If you're taking testosterone exogenously, and it's there, then your body is going to stop producing it. And now there's very little research out there to show long-term of taking melatonin. We don't have it yet. We'll probably have it here in the next 10 years, but we don't have it yet. Now, there was a short-term study that a gentleman did where he did, I think it was around 3,000 milligrams of melatonin a day. Now, typical dose is about 3 to 5 milligrams, just so everyone is aware. 3,000 milligrams. And he did before and after research and showed there wasn't any change in his production of melatonin after he was doing that. But this was only 6 or 8 weeks. Now it's only 2 months, and that's, again, it's a very short amount of time, and it's only done on himself. So there's low quality of evidence. Don't take really anything of that other than just an experience. So the reason why I would recommend you not to use melatonin, just like I don't recommend you to use any drowsy medication or any medication for sleep, is because you'll become dependent on it, number one. And two, I'm worried about the exogenous production of melatonin for you in long-term fashion. So that is why I would recommend you trying other things like Doc had mentioned, just calming yourself down in the shower before bed, dimming the lights, having a cold temperature, doing all the things that doesn't have an impact on the production of your neurotransmitters and hormones, so that you can at least recreate a healthy sleep space for you every night, and you're not relying on a drug or medication or supplement. So that's my take. Doc, what's your take?
I feel the same way. Like and I've looked at many lines of research, upwards of 8 to 10 studies that has shown for majority of people in all studies that have very little to no effects. And I think going back to what Doc said, when we're naturally producing melatonin, especially in the pineal gland, it's not going to allow us, it's almost like taking a hormone for your body, which can naturally regulate melatonin. So for most people, it won't have the effects. However, if it works for you, going back to the placebo effect, it's a real thing. And if it works for you, I'd keep on with that. However, if you're just taking it because you don't know of any other sleep supplements, I would suggest trying other aspects, other tools, other things than melatonin for that exact reason. So that's my 2 cents. I absolutely agree. Cool. Now, going into other supplements, what are some of the other things that people can take to help with the sleep and sleep quality?
For sure. And again, the ones that I'm about to get into are not comparable to melatonin, because the other ones are not a neurotransmitter you make in your body.
Yes.
Right? So this is a little different. Yeah. So the next one is one that I know everyone has heard of, and we've even talked about it on prior podcasts, and it's magnesium. And not only should you try magnesium for sleep, but you should take it every day. Magnesium is used in hundreds of processes in your body. So magnesium alone is something you should be taking every day, not even just to help improve your sleep, but just to improve all around body in general. But magnesium does a couple things that we've been able to note. It's one, it helps to improve the production of GABA, and that is a calming effect. It helps to induce a calming effect on your body. It also blocks your NMDA receptor, which is an excitatory part of the synapsing of your brain. So it helps to induce calmness and inhibit excitatory modulation in the brain. It actually helps to regulate muscle tension. We know that we use it a lot with patients who are having cramping and just tightness alone. It helps to aid in digestion and a lot of other things to help calm digestion, just so many other processes it's involved with. So magnesium, super helpful. Doc, have you ever used magnesium for sleep?
Yeah, and not every night, but most nights. And magnesium is one of the most deficient in the body that most people need. Going back to what Doc said, one sign that we look for with patients, cramping, excessive cramping. And there's different forms of magnesium, whether it's magnesium lactate, magnesium malate. For most people, suggesting magnesium citrate would be beneficial.
Yeah. The next one is called Inositol, and we don't really know why yet Inositol has an effect on sleep, but some research has shown it can make an improvement. So usually the things that you'll experience is not only ability to sleep better, but it has an anti-anxiety actual kind of component to it as well. So they're thinking maybe it has the ability to at least calm you down so you can go to sleep, not necessarily impact sleep quality itself. So Inositol is another one. So the third one is Valerian Root. And Valerian Root is quite a powerful compound, and so just be cautious with it because it actually has sedative properties, and it can actually give you night terrors or just worsening dreams. Not everyone gets them, but you're more prone to having vivid dreams on Valerian Root. So again, it has sedative properties. Again, your ability to fall asleep has also anti-anxiety properties too with it. There's a lot of cortisol managing supplements that have valerian root in it. There's a lot of pain supplements. There's a lot of, again, sleep supplements. So it has a lot of properties, most of which are used to at least calm you down. And then the last one that I have is called L-Theanine. L-Theanine, again, is just, it has effects on GABA, it has effects on a lot of the other neurotransmitters that, again, helps calm you down, improve sleep, all the other things. So those are the ones that I most commonly hear people try and have some effect, at least on an improving sleep, among other things, which, again, tie to sleep, which is calm, improving calmness and anxiety. So were there any others, Doc?
I use L-theanine for a lot of people. With that, if you're a sleepwalker, I would not suggest taking that, but pay attention, most people don't sleepwalk, or even with the valerian root, if you have night terrors, maybe trying a different supplement.
I know we didn't really preface this quite yet, but I do want to bring up, if those who are listening have insomnia, that is something completely different than we're really talking about right now.
Yeah.
Not to say that some of these things maybe can't help, but insomnia is a very difficult issue to manage. And I'm sure, as you know, from those of you that have struggled with it, it's not just take a supplement, feel a little better condition. It's something that you need to address at the core with a provider and someone who can at least help manage that. So, and I know if you're out there searching for effective ways to manage it, definitely, I know what we have said on here may have a little bit of an input, but it's by no means something that we feel listening to what we have spoken about today is going to cure and or treat this. So insomnia is something, it's just a different beast, unfortunately. And it could not only be chemical, but it can even be electrical. There's just so many things that it could be. So yes, we are mentioning some helpful ways to help get to sleep, but again, if you're dealing with something way more severe, reach out to a provider who can help you and try to get some better insight than just some overlay of a podcast.
Yeah,
So.
and I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't bring this up earlier. So insomnia, that's where it changes the sleeping cycle, because for normal you have to go from non-REM stages 1, 2, 3, 4, REM, and it has to go in that order. For insomnia, you can go from stages 1, 2, and then dive straight into REM, and then go back to deep sleep, non-REM 3, 4. So it's a different disconnect of electrical signals in the brain, which when we look at from a provider standpoint is more of a pathology that, like Doc said, you would want to go do a sleep institute, do a whole sleep study. And that's where when they look at the sleep study, they break down 30-second increments on like the total amount of time, and they look at what are the main frequencies at that rate, and they put all that information together as a whole to see where you're at on your cycle. But
Good point. So lastly, we have something here that Doc and I are obviously super excited to get into because we hear it almost every day, which is, all right, we're breathing better during sleep. We're maybe trying some different things to get into a calmer, deeper sleep. But how physically should we sleep? And so we're going to talk a little bit about the different sleeping positions that you can try and what we feel as musculoskeletal experts are actually the most appropriate for you as far as sleeping, not only to improve sleep, but to improve the body as a whole over time, because you're going to be in those positions a third of your life. So I would assume there is definitely going to be a huge impact to how we sleep positionally. That's going to make an impact on our joints, on our body, and of course sleep alone.
So when we go into sleeping positions, and thank you, Doc, there's mainly 3 different positions for most people that you can find yourself in, whether it's laying on your back, laying on your side, or your stomach. There's certain individuals that have to sleep in a recliner, whether that's because they have sleep apnea and their passage for breathing has to put them seated, which that leads to a bunch of other complications. Now, the main premise on why we look at sleeping positions is the body adapts to forces over time, especially forces of gravity that are constantly placing down on us. And that's a factor that all humans have to take into consideration, whether it's rehab, training, sleep. The best position for most people that you can find yourself in is laying on your back. Now, when we look at this, Why this is as important as it is, it allows cervical curvature, especially for most people. If you find a pillow that's a little thicker and it causes your head to tilt, it causes elongation of the spinal cord, which can cause other symptoms down the road, especially over time. Making sure that your head's curved a little bit. If you have to roll up a towel underneath your neck, beautiful, that's fine. And then also for the legs, if you have pressure with your legs straight, you might want to bend the knees or put a pillow underneath the knees as you lay down. With your arms, I've played around with this. If you try to sleep palms facing upwards, that will help for the external rotation, which most of the time we find ourselves turn inwards on the computer. For most people, when we find ourselves of all of our arms in front of our body, they're almost facing downwards, whether it's the computer work, whether it's construction work. So best position on our back, because curvatures of the spine and helps everything relax in some sort of neutral position. Now on the side, this is when we have to look at a couple different scenarios. Most people ask, what pillow do I need? The best piece of advice I can give is pay attention to your head in correlation to the neck. So if you have a thicker pillow, it's going to cause this tilting between the head, the neck, and the pillow, which can force and cause tilting of the bones in the top of the neck, which can cause headaches and a bunch of other symptoms from there. So making sure that the head is in line with the neck, that's going to be important. Now, the second aspect with this is with your arm, the bottom arm. If you lay on your arm, it can cause compression of the ribs, and we've seen this in patients to where if you have pain on your side when waking up, try to bring your arm in front of your body, and then the other arm either holding on to a pillow so the arm doesn't completely collapse and twist the rib cage. But then the second part of this is the top leg. For most people, especially females, they're going to find it tucking and bending over. That might feel calm and relaxing, but it's also twisting the pelvis on the rib cage, which when you get up over time, that will force us, this is exaggerated quite a bit, to be twisted. Now, the most important parts with this is if you're sleeping on your stomach, let's say for this, what way is your head turned and where are your arms at? For starters, it's going to bring the heart down, which has a calming effect, increases serotonin release, which helps you get into sleep. But for some people that have no accidents, no injuries, but they sleep on their stomach, over time, it's remolding the tissues between the neck, upper back, and rib cage to where you start seeing curvatures on the upper portion, and then over time, it's going to affect the lower back, and you're going to have problems from there. So if you want to switch any positions, a few small key takeaways with this. If you're on your back, that's fine. I wouldn't switch up too much unless it's hard for you to fall asleep. Then maybe try the left side down where the heart drops downwards. That'll help. If you want to switch up from side to on your back, you could do a pillow barrier. So if you have other pillows and we sleep on our side, to prevent you from twisting over even more, we want to go in the opposite direction. So we want our underarm to come on top of a pillow, which against gravity, which naturally force us to lay upwards. And then maybe try to bring a pillow underneath the back leg so you can rest on that side. Now, if you want to switch up from stomach to side, pillow barrier as well. So grabbing a longer pillow or multiple pillows, whatever way your head turns, that's the way we want your body to start twisting. So from that, we can slowly lay down a layer of pillows, and over time, we're going to transition to your side. And this is going to take a few days to get used to. If it's hard for you to fall asleep, try for a period of time, toss all the pillows, and try to get into sleep, because the most important factor is the sleep and deep quality sleep. But if you have aches and pains, it's something that you can work on over time. Now, if you find yourself sleeping in a recliner because of sleep apnea, or you can't lay on a bed because you become dizzy, that's where we will slowly want to lower you from seated to as flat as we possibly can, to on the bed laying down with pillows propped up. And then over time, even with that laying on the recliner, you also want a little bit of a towel or pillow, which will induce curvature of the spine, so you don't have the pulling from the base of your skull to the spine, thus less headaches, neck tension, and even pulling tension going down to your lower back. So those are a few key parts to where sleeping position best is on your back or your side. If you're sleeping on your stomach, very, very highly recommended to transition to your side. You can do that through pillow barriers and or switching the sides of the bed. Now, Doc, I'm gonna bring you in on this one. So the different sides of the bed, I know my wife and I, we've had these different sides, or I'm always on the side. When you look at the bed facing straight on, I'm on the left side. My wife's always on the right, and she will definitely not switch. I know, like if you're on your constant side or right side down, you wanna switch that up. So having that conversation with the spouse to eventually, hopefully, try to switch sides maybe for a few weeks at a time, a month, a quarter of the year. What's your thoughts, intake on that?
I get it. I'm very particular about which side I sleep on for many given reasons. But really what I'll find is there was actually a time where I had to switch sides with my girlfriend, and it was necessarily. I won't get into the specifics of it, but we ended up switching, and it was definitely for the better. However, it was tougher to sleep right away, and I do think that there is a huge play into which side you're sleeping on. It's probably just as far as a comfort thing or what you're used to, but not only what I think sleeping on one side or another, it's more of just how comfortable you are in that entire setting. Mm-hmm. Another thing too is not only switching sides, but switching the mattress around itself is super crucial. I think you should rotate your mattress probably about once every 6 months. Again, if you think about it, it's kind of like you switching your car tires in a way. You know, it's going to wear certain parts of the mattress out, and when you can actually get a proper rotating schedule of wearing, you'll find there's going to be less angles and creases in that mattress, and it's probably going to be more comfortable over time too. Mm-hmm. So I do recommend that as well. But yeah, I know that most of the time people have their sides and they're going to stick to their sides too, but the ways that I think you can combat that too if you don't want to switch is at least just rotating the mattress, so you have the ability to at least get a proper wear pattern on the mattress, and you get everything out of the mattress that you're purchasing, because I know they're expensive, so you want to make sure you get the best of what you have.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that, and especially on Dr. Addy's point, if you have spring mattresses, that is very, very crucial. With some of the newer mattresses coming out with memory foam, it's maybe not as crucial, but that's a point absolutely to consider. And even going with certain mattresses, they say to change those out every 10 years. You could probably push it out. If it's newer memory foam, anywhere from 15 to 20 years is what they're saying right now. So that's a really smart point.
And I know we didn't really hit on mattresses. We can, I guess, for a little bit here. There really isn't, like Doc was saying, technology nowadays, all of them are really good. I recently just kind of looked into all of the mattresses again. I've been looking for one. You have, is it Nectar and Purple and Casper and Memory Foam and Infinity and like Tempur-Pedic, Sleep Number, you name it, man. I don't think you're going to go wrong with any of them. The only thing that I would recommend is if you and your partner have such different ways they want to sleep, Sleep Number is nice because you can adjust it accordingly per side, which is good. You can also adjust temperature per side, which is great, because obviously if, again, back to, it might be, you know, one of you might run a little hotter than the other, and so if you want a cooler side versus the other, it could maybe make a difference. All in all, that's definitely something that's important, but as long as you feel that it is comfortable, I think that's going to be the most positive, because we want to make sure that you sleep. But in regards to curvature, and like Doc was saying, the firmer the bed definitely is better, so that it can actually help support a lot of the curves that we have. And I'm curious if that has to do with the fact we slept on such hard ground when we were, you know, how many other thousands of years ago. I don't think there is great research on a lot of this either, the kind of how we've ended the podcast. There is not a lot of great research on all this, but because we've studied the body for so long, this is our best theory and hypothesis, and it's a good one because a lot of other chiros that are watching this would probably agree with us. And you're going to hear it repeated time and time again, what we've said today. So I know there are many out there who have said, and I've heard it from patients, I'm just a stomach sleeper, and I can only sleep on my stomach. And that stinks, it is. I do want you to make sure that you get the sleep that's appropriate, and if that's the only way you can sleep, by all means, if you need some sleep, get some sleep. But I would encourage you to try and change it. And I'm arguing that you can change it.
Oh, yes.
I know that you may think you've only slept that way and you can only sleep that way moving forward, but I would disagree. And I think you can change it. And I would recommend you change it so that you can at least keep the proper joints in your body from wearing out accordingly. Because like we said, this is a third of your life. And if you're lying in a position that is not advantageous for you for that long in life, it's going to have an effect. And I know we've heard it. Patients will come in and say, I was sleeping on my left side. Man, am I in pain. Switched to my right side. It kind of made a difference. Like, people notice. These are things that people notice, and I know you've noticed it too. I know for myself, when I lie on my stomach, I actually get back pain. I have a little more of a curvature in my back. It's called a lordosis. We all have a proper amount of curvature in our low back, and some have it more than others, some have it less, but I have it more. And when I'm lying on my stomach, like Doc was saying, gravity is pulling my spine into even more of a curvature, which is causing what feels to me as an impingement or kind of like a sharp pain. And so when it only takes 20 minutes, maybe 30, by the time I need to move out of that position because it is painful for me. And so again, these are things that I think people notice. And if you feel that there is a position that is causing you pain, but you feel you sleep better in, then instead of pushing through that, I would recommend trying to change it. Also knowing you're going to give up some nights of sleep. Unfortunately, that's just what happens. But it's going to be better in the long term. Heck, you might even sleep better after changing. And of course, it's going to be better for your body. So that's kind of how I want to end that. Anything with you, Doc?
That's perfect.
Perfect. All right. That's everything we have for you guys today. I thank you again for listening. For those who have stayed tuned, we're super, super grateful again for every one of you. Thank you so much. Comment, like, subscribe. We really appreciate everything that you guys have continued to, as you supported us and shared what we're saying, we really appreciate it. So thank you so much. We hope to see you and hear from you guys again soon on the next one. And you guys have a great day. Thank you guys so much. This is the Functional Code. Woo! Have a good day, guys.
Thanks for joining us on the Functional Code. For more evidence-based health insights, subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, your journey to a healthier you begins with understanding the Functional Code. Until next time, stay well, stay informed, and embrace the science of living well.